So, I guess we know where Wizards of the Coast stand on the whole Edward vs. Jacob debate. Werewolves are CR3 creatures, and vampires are CR13. That's the same as a beholder. Now, I think a beholder would wreck a vampire in a fight, but the fact they're considered to be in the same league at all is wild. Hello, my name is Matt, and welcome to My Hidden Nerdy Side, a channel created by a nerd who doesn't have many nerdy friends, and so I must rant to you. Today we are going to be tackling vampires, an iconic creature in any medium of entertainment and a terrific example of a powerful creature with flaws and limitations stopping it from being overpowered. We're going to go over the basic lore, abilities, and background info surrounding these blood-sucking badasses and build an encounter you can steal, modify, and plop directly into your D&D game. With this encounter, we're going to explore a little mystery, evil plots, and even storm a castle. So let's do this. If you are well aware of the basic lore, background info, and mechanics behind vampires in D&D, then feel free to pop on over to the timestamp right here so you can jump straight to the encounter itself. I'll leave a clickable version in the description below. Also, if you like what I do here, stick around and subscribe, for I'll be putting out at least one of these videos every week and hopefully additional content the more this channel grows. Alright, let's take a quick look at vampires. The lore, info, abilities, and so on will be pulled directly from pages 295 to 298 of the Monster Manual. So, like typical vampires, they absolutely love drinking blood and can't get enough of it. They also never cast a shadow or reflection, and can't be seen in sunlight for they'll burn, which means they usually only go out at night. They also don't require air to breathe, are harmed if they're exposed to running water, and cannot enter someone's house unless they're invited. But some things you may not know are whether a vampire does or does not retain memories from its past life, its pure feelings and emotional attachments become twisted and turned into negative and harmful feelings. For example, love might turn into obsession, friendship into jealousy, and so on. Those who die from a vampire bite turn into vampire spawn, weaker and less intelligent but still deadly vampires forced to obey their master's commands. A vampire can turn a vampire spawn into a true vampire if it allows a vampire spawn to drink its blood. But this is very rare because, well, who would want to give up a guaranteed loyal servant? And finally, vampires are bound to their resting place and must sleep there during the day. A vampire can move its resting place to a different location and even have multiple resting locations by moving either their coffin or a significant amount of dirt from the resting place somewhere else. On top of that, if somehow someone comes across a vampire in its resting place and shove a wooden stake in its heart, it is paralyzed until the stake is removed. Alright, let's take a quick look at what it can do. For the full stat block, check out page 297 of the Monster Manual or click on the D&D Beyond link you can find in the description, but we'll go over the main abilities and actions we'll be using for this encounter here. If a vampire isn't in sunlight or running water, it can change into a tiny bat, a medium cloud of mist, or back into a vampire. This could be potentially useful for scouting, running away, or trying to sneak up on the party. Vampires have 3 legendary resistances a day and have spider climb for some reason. When they drop to 0 outside of their resting place, they automatically turn into a cloud of mist instead of falling unconscious, so long as they aren't in sunlight or under running water. If they can't transform, they die on the spot. The vampire must reach its resting place within 2 hours or die. Once it's there, it turns back into a vampire and is paralyzed until it regains at least 1 hit point, which it does if it spends at least 1 hour in its resting place. And finally, vampires automatically regenerate 20 hit points at the start of their turn so long as it still has hit points and hasn't been in sunlight, been under running water, taken radiant damage, or damage from holy water before its turn. Those are the abilities important to our encounter, but there are still more you should check out either in the Monster Manual or on D&D Beyond. Now let's quickly run through its actions. It has an unarmed strike that can either do damage or grapple you on hit, and of course, it can also bite you. On top of that, vampires can regenerate for the full amount of damage dealt to their targets, so stacking this with its regeneration ability could lead to some very long fights if the party isn't prepared. It's important to note, in order for a vampire to bite its victims, the target needs to be either willing, grappled, incapacitated, or restrained. And if the target's HP reduces to 0 due to a vampire's bite, they die and revive as a vampire spawn the following night. They have a charm ability that requires a DC 17 wisdom save to avoid, which makes biting your targets much simpler. And they can summon swarms of bats, rats, or wolves that follow the vampire's commands. They arrive in 1d4 rounds and last for an hour. Vampires also have 3 legendary actions, which they can use to move, bite, or unarmed strike. And finally, there are some regional effects when you are within 500 feet of a vampire's lair. Although surprisingly, no official lair actions. There are a bunch more bats, rats, and wolves around the lair. Plants wither and die and branches become thorny and twisted. Shadows seem oddly gaunt and move as if they have their own free will. and there is a fog that looks off and sometimes takes ominous shapes such as slithering snakes or claws. So before we jump into the encounter, let's very quickly discuss something fun, which is what happens to player characters if they turn into vampires. It's pretty straightforward. Your mental stats don't change, but your strength, dex, and con all jump up to 18 unless they're already higher. You gain a vampire's resistances, dark vision, traits, and actions, and your attack damage rolls are based on strength. Your charm DC is 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your charisma modifier. Your character becomes lawful evil, and the DM may or may not control the vampire until they are returned to normal, which can only be done using the wish spell or killing the character and reviving them. So depending on what kind of campaign you're running, this can be an incredibly fun element to play with. Alright, so now that we've gone over the basic vampire lore, abilities, and background info, let's start crafting an encounter. This encounter will be aimed at parties level 9 to 13 depending on how difficult you want to make it, and last roughly 1 to 3 sessions depending on how long you want to stretch it out. The party's motivation should always be tailored to the campaign you're running, but whatever your party is after is said to be found in a castle in an abandoned town. For simplicity's sake, in this video we'll call that town Bradenford. So your party is traveling to Bradenford and will stop by a small village on their way. The villagers will strongly encourage your party not to go to Bradenford, for it is swamped with loads and loads of dangerous and horrifying undead creatures and was abandoned years ago. However, if your party is insistent on going, which they will be, the villagers will say the only 3 living survivors of the Bradenford incident live in the village if the party wants to find out more about what happened. Nigel, the town's historian, Boris, a simple cobbler who claims there's a 4th survivor, and Mildred, an old traveling witch, brewer, magician, or something of that nature that best fits within your world, who also has an eye patch over her left eye. If they visit Nigel, he'll give the party a rundown on what happened. Bradenford used to be governed by Sierra and Layla Montalaro, the town's noble family. They were sisters that were 2 years apart but were very close, both personally and in appearance. One day, Sierra, the eldest sister, arranged a marriage between her and a man called Iwan Enderova, a man from a magically talented family. The family is run by Morwenna, a powerful sorceress who apparently arranged the marriage with Sierra. Months later, the Enderova family came to finalize the marriage when all of a sudden a creepy, ever-changing fog shot out from around the castle. Several minutes later, a servant came running out of the castle drenched in his own blood and used his dying words to warn everyone not to go in there. However, the townspeople loved the 2 sisters, particularly Layla, who did so much charity work for the townspeople. So the people sent in 2 scouts to check out what is inside the fog, but they never returned. So within a few days, the townspeople organized and armed 30 people and charged the mansion, but they too did not return. The following night, a horde of vile, undead monsters swarmed the town and slaughtered everyone in sight. Only 3 people made it out alive: Nigel, Boris, and Mildred. The town has been abandoned ever since. If the party talks to Boris, he can offer a bit of flavor, but the only important piece of new information he will offer is a strange pattern of events he witnessed. The night after the incident, he was drinking at a tavern and then wandered off into the woods. When in the forest, he saw a gravestone and what appeared to be a pale Sierra Montalaro standing over it alone. He was drunk at the time, so he didn't think anything of it. But then the following day, he was drunk and walked into the forest again and saw the exact same thing. He wanted to go check the following day, but later that night the monsters attacked and he had to make a break for it. Finally, if you talk to Mildred, she'll say she isn't from Bradenford but was traveling there the day of the incident. She'll tell you that the creepy monsters are actually vampire spawn and most likely serve a master vampire, and if your party kills the vampire, the spawn will be leaderless and disorganized. Most importantly, she'll tell you about how to kill a vampire. She'll explain that they turn into clouds of mist and must reach their resting place within 2 hours or will die. She will also tell the party that they have an additional hour to burn and destroy the body and resting place before the vampire revives. If your party has talked to Boris, it should now be clear that the pale ghostly Sierra is actually a vampire. Alright, on to Bradenford. Now there are 2 ways I see this playing out. Either your party simply storms or sneaks into the castle, or they wait by the gravestone Boris mentioned for Sierra to be alone so they can take out the master vampire and make the castle attack easier. Both options are fun and viable, but the gravestone option definitely makes things more intense, and you'll see why. Now, when the party arrives, they'll notice the entire town is enveloped in this ominous fog, which you can make as easy or difficult to see through as you like, but make sure the top layer is thick enough so sunlight doesn't get through and roast all your bad guys. They'll also notice vampire spawn and other creatures if you like roaming around, and a well-dressed female vampire is among them, petting and stroking them like they're dogs or kittens and saying things like, "How are my beloved people today?" This vampire will match the description of Sierra Montellaro given by Boris. The vampire will then make her way to the forest alone. If the party make it to the gravestone, they'll see Sierra standing over it. If the party can perceive what the gravestone says, they'll see the words Sierra Montellaro draped across it. Sierra will be all alone, and your party will see this as their chance to gank a vampire and end this quickly. I would keep this fight between the party and Sierra and let them get a fairly easy victory. Upon defeating Sierra, they'll see her turn into a cloud of mist and begin to float higher and higher into the sky, circling around the grave. When it's high enough in the sky, instead of shooting down into the grave, it'll start darting over to the castle. The party will be confused, and if they dig up the gravestone, they'll see that there's a coffin in there, but there's also a decomposing body. With the information your party has, they will realize they only have 3 hours to reach the vampire's resting place before it revives and is surrounded by its minions. This turns the potentially lengthy and careful castle invasion into an intense race against the clock. So, whose body is in Sierra's grave? Well, it's Sierra's. You see, the vampire isn't Sierra, it's her sister, Layla. However, since they look so similar and Boris was drunk during the times he saw her, he mistook her for Sierra. It's likely your party won't know this quite yet, and how you want to reveal this information is up to you. If the party storms the castle to begin with, Layla can simply reveal this information herself. I personally like the idea of leaving out torn-out journal entries around the castle that are all pieces to a much larger story. Because, of course, there is more to the story. As your party storms the castle and searches for where Layla's resting place can be, they will come across these journal entries. Upon reading them, what happened that night will become evidently clear from Layla's perspective. You see, the Enderovas discovered the Montellaros have magical blood within them, blood that can end up breeding some powerful offspring or be used for dangerous rituals. Wanting the power of their blood, the Enderovas arranged a marriage between Iwan and Sierra. Layla found out about this, and fearing for what a sorceress could do with such powerful magical blood, she confronted Iwan and Morwenna, telling her to leave or she'll stick the town guards on her. Morwenna then placed a powerful curse on Layla that would activate if she did anything to stop the marriage. This did not stop Layla, and she pulled out a dagger and killed Iwan. Upon doing this, she died and turned into a vampire due to the curse. And her love of the people turned into a weird obsession that caused her to turn any she saw into a vampire spawn and treat them like a pet. Upon seeing the death of her son, Morwenna killed Sierra out of spite and then managed to escape. Another thing to note is Morwenna is also described as having an eye patch over her left eye. If that sounds familiar, that's because Mildred does as well, and that's not a coincidence. Unfortunately, Layla is now evil and too far gone, and this will be evidently clear by her demeanor. However, your party can still retrieve whatever they were originally after, clear out the vampire spawn, find and destroy her resting place, and let Bradenford be inhabitable again. So, this is a dark encounter that can either become a stealthy invasion or a race against the clock. But what if we wanted to make it even spicier? Well, I think one of the best ways is to bring back Mildred, aka Morwenna, and have her come to claim the now dead Layla and try and extract her blood. Another way is to of course change up the type of townspeople living in the town and possibly have giant vampires or Kuatoa vampires or Myconid vampires or whatever else is wacky. Maybe you could have Layla bite her sister Sierra before she dies and then turn her into a vampire as well and have a vampire-sister tag team. Or maybe Sierra is disgusted with what Layla has done, and so Layla drives a stake in Sierra's heart and buries her. And when your party digs up the grave, they actually find Sierra, and now your party has a vampire ally to help take Layla down. But of course, these are just some of the ways you can use vampires in your Dungeons & Dragons game. There are tons of different ways to take this encounter and spice it up, so please, let me know what you would do in the comment section below so I can nerd out over them and smack myself in the head for not thinking of them. I'm going to be putting out at least one of these videos a week, so feel free to subscribe and share this video around if you liked it, and stay tuned for upcoming content. Thanks for watching and indulging my hidden nerdy side.